today, the housing construction mess. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news. Now, the Australian Bureau of Statistics today released its monthly building approvals data for April for detached houses and multi-units, covering all states and territories across the country. The total number of dwellings approved fell 8.1% in April in season-adjusted terms, they said. That followed a 1% decrease in March. Total dwellings approved fell to the lowest level since April 2012, and the overall decline was driven by a fall in approvals of private sector dwellings, excluding houses, which fell 16.5% to the lowest level since January 2012. Private sector house approvals also continued to decline, falling 3.8% in April, following a 3.7% decrease in March. Across Australia, total dwelling approvals were mixed, with falls in Queensland down 22.8%, Victoria down 18.6%, and Western Australia down 5.8%. Meanwhile, rises were recorded in South Australia, up 19.8%, New South Wales up 12.5%, and Tasmania up 3.5%. Approvals for private sector houses fell in Victoria, down 9.3%, Queensland fell 6%, and New South Wales was down 1.7%, with South Australia up 10.8% and Western Australia up 0.1%. The value of total building approvals rose 4.7%, following a 5.7% fall in March, and the value of total residential building approvals fell 2.5%, comprising of a 2.7% decrease in new residential building and a 1.2% fall in alterations and additions. The value of non-residential building approvals increased 13.5%. That followed a 5.1% fall in March. Now, according to the HIA, building approvals for April remained at their lowest level in over a decade, with declines continuing in both houses and multi-units. Detached houses declined by 3.6% in a month, and multi-units fell by 16.9%. On a quarterly basis, this leaves detached house approvals 15.4% lower than at the same time the previous year, and multi-units down 38.9%. This continues the long-lagged response of Australian home buyers to the RBA's interest rate hiking cycle, with further declines expected in the coming months, they said. The combination of construction cost blowouts, labour uncertainties, increased compliance costs, and taxes on investors have seen approvals for multi-units fall. These disappointing approval numbers are occurring as population growth surges with the return of overseas migrants, students and tourists. This imbalance will see the affordability and rental crisis deteriorate further, they concluded. Now, according to policymaker Robert Sabriya of the Australian Constructors Association, national data suggests that the financial position of large residential builders are already in jeopardy, with more than half technically insolvent. Sabriya stated that many builders are still struggling as a result of rising material costs, but that was thankfully yesterday's news. There are some builders still suffering from having to endure the gap between the prices they are paying and the prices they received.
In the 12 months to April 2023, nationally, New South Wales had the most builders go into administration, with just over 45%. Now, Victoria was next at 27%, with Queensland third, where 15% of construction companies put up the white flag. The remaining states fared pretty well, though.
It is shocking. Who would have thought that some of these names would ever be considered in this sort of vein? I hope we're getting close to the end of it, but it's hard to predict.
Family companies with 30 or 40 years experience, like Halbury in Melbourne, they also crashed.
And Sabriya has been tracking Equifax data on the asset to liability ratio of large residential home builders. For the median builder in that category, the ratio has gone negative now, he said. That means half of large vertical builders in Australia at the moment are technically insolvent, and that's a pretty dark kind of conclusion. And he also warned that Australia is structurally set for falling rates of housing supply at the same time as demand will ramp up, both through record net overseas migration and an ageing population. This industry is facing some huge structural imbalances between supply and demand that will go over the top of the pandemic cycle and will dwarf everything for the next few decades, he said. On the demand side, we're looking far above just accommodating every extra person. We've got to look at all of this other stuff. And at the same time, we've got the supply side shrinking. We've got an ageing population, which means the workforce is shrinking. By 2050, the share of the population who are young men will be about half the number it was in the 1980s. And that's the main cohort of workers you rely on to build things. The absurdity of Australia's housing predicament was encapsulated, of course, in the federal budget's population forecasts. Australia's population is officially projected to increase by 2.18 million people in the 5 years to 26-27. That's an average of 435,200 people each year. This increase, of course, is driven by overseas migration of 300,000 net a year over the same period, according to the budget. To put this projected population increase in perspective, it's equivalent of adding 5 Canberras or 1 Perth's worth of people to Australia's current population in only 5 years. Such an unprecedented increase in population is an insurmountable task under the very best housing conditions, and it's even more insurmountable when the entire residential housing industry is suffering widespread insolvencies amid soaring materials prices and financing costs. So, in conclusion, the housing shortage will deteriorate given actual construction levels are falling, as shown by the approvals, at the same time as Australia's population is projected to grow by between 400,000 and 500,000 people a year. Australia's housing shortage is first and foremost the result of excessive levels of immigration, but the follow-on are falling building approvals, limited supply, and more builders going bust. It's a fine mess. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.